Okay then, so first of all, justice among God's people. Secondly, injustice among the nations. What about when it looks like God has lost control and his people's enemies are winning, are on top? When churches are burned down and Christians massacred in Nigeria, when Christians are arrested in China, when it's illegal to become a Christian in some countries in the world, when the tide in our own country seems to be going only in one direction. And the anti-Christian forces, whether they be military or online, legal or social, gloat over their dismantling of Christianity. Well, look with me at verse 7. It was God's intention to use Assyria to discipline and to not destroy. But verse 7, this is not what he intends, the king of Assyria. This is not what he has in mind. His purpose is to destroy, to put an end to many nations. Are not my commanders all kings? He says. And then verse 10. As my hand seized the kingdoms of the idols, kingdoms whose images excelled those of Jerusalem and Samaria, shall I not deal with Jerusalem and her images, as I dealt with Samaria and her idols? Assyria's king is gloating over his power. He thinks there's nothing to stop him doing whatever it is that he likes. He's top of the food chain, he thinks. And he's bragging about it, isn't he? Doesn't that sound like many of today's non-Christian, anti-Christian commentators? Doesn't it sound like those who would dismantle the church, destroy God's people, sooner than they would swat a fly? It can feel overwhelming, can't it? If you're someone living in a home where there's someone who's not just non-Christian, but is almost anti-Christian, it's exhausting, isn't it? It can feel like a constant dark cloud over you, a constant threat. You might have a work colleague or a friend who's a militant atheist, always trying to attack what it is that you believe, always having a go. And increasingly, sections of society are thinking that biblical Christianity is evil and needs stamping out. We've gone in a few short years from being typecast as the do-gooders to the do-badders. Holding firm to the Christian faith and its implications, particularly in the area of sexual practice and marriage, is seen as dangerous, isn't it? Christians are accused of being homophobic, transphobic, and probably lots of other things phobic too. We're seen as causing mental health crises in young people just because we want to stick to the Maker's instructions. And that, people say, is a public health issue. And we've seen how society reacts to public health issues over the last few months, haven't we? No longer is the media slow to call for government action to curtail public health crises. Are we ready to be legislated against? Are we ready for it to be illegal to explain certain parts of the Bible in ways they've always been understood by Christians? Are you ready to find yourself on the wrong side of the law just for being a Bible-believing Christian? In Isaiah's time, it was Assyria who was coming for the people of God. Many saw the only way to save themselves is to make an alliance with another nation to protect themselves. We'll find out later in Isaiah that Judah's political leaders made an alliance with Egypt. And we'll see what God made of that when we get to chapter 30, probably next year. The pressure's only going to rise in the coming months and years on us. We've seen how quickly things can move over the last few months, haven't we? It's not going to be getting any easier to be a Bible-believing Christian in the UK and in many countries, because there's injustice among the nations. Let's break there and come back in a few minutes to find out what God is going to do about this injustice.